One more thing. One more thing. One more thing. One more thing. One more thing.
One more thing.
One more thing. There is one more thing that I want to talk about.
One more thing. These three words have excited Apple fans all over the world for decades. Apple has always had a reputation for surprising us. But in recent years, it seems like Apple has become more and more boring. Their keynotes and products haven't generated the same level of excitement as they used to. So, what has happened to Apple? For the past decade, I have been a massive fan of Apple. I've owned several MacBooks, iPads and iPhones, and I've looked forward to every keynote. But in recent years, I haven't cared at all. I've either forgotten about them or had something more interesting to do. Apple has recently updated their iPhone, iPad and Apple Watch lines. A lot of people have called them boring, and for the past couple of years, it's been the same story. All the products have either been minor updates or new products that look like something we have seen elsewhere. What has always made Apple great is their ability to put out these revolutionary new products that completely change the way we use technology. But since Steve Jobs died 8 years ago, the only truly new product Apple has put out is the Apple Watch, and that is 4 years ago. Apple is not what it used to be. And with the legendary designer Sir Johnny Ive leaving Apple to form his new company, Lovefrom, it's pretty apparent that they are a different company now. There's been lots of talk about that the recent keynotes have been underwhelming, and that Tim Cook lacks Steve Jobs' charisma. But the fact that the products they have presented have been disappointing is a big part of it. To understand how Apple has changed and why that is, we have to take a brief look at the history of Apple. Chapter 1. The Steve and Steve Era. Apple was founded by Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak in 1976, the year after they released the Apple II, which ended up selling very well. They went on to release the Lisa, which was the first commercially available personal computer with a graphical user interface. That means that it works like most computers do today, where you use a mouse and click on icons and windows to navigate the computer. Before that, all computers used a text-based interface, where the user typed in commandos to tell the computer what to do. The problem was that the Lisa costed $10,000, so it didn't sell that well. So they replaced it with the Macintosh, which was a lot like the Lisa, but had another physical design, but it did share the same graphical user interface. It was better and more affordable, and the world was changed forever. Chapter 2. The Scully Era. Steve Jobs quit Apple in 1985 after being pushed out by John Scully. Steve Wozniak had also quit the year before. That left Apple without its founders and was now run by a bunch of businessmen. In the next decade, Apple put out a lot of different products. Laptops, desktops, a CD player, a TV, a gaming console, and PDAs. Basically everything you can imagine. And there's nothing really unusual about that. Lots of companies like Samsung and Sony do that. They have pretty much every kind of electronic products. But Apple didn't release anything really new or anything as exciting or successful as the Macintosh. Meanwhile, Microsoft became very successful. They released Windows, that also had a graphical user interface, just like the Macintosh. But Windows could run on any PC, and that gave Microsoft a competitive advantage. Now people could get a computer that was easy to use for a lot less money than a Macintosh. So Apple's sales decreased, everybody used PCs with Windows, and pretty much every single product that Apple released failed. Chapter 3. The Return of Steve Jobs. Threatened by bankruptcy, Apple bought a company called Next in 1996, which was founded by Steve Jobs and made powerful computers for universities and for professional use. Along with the company, Apple got Steve Jobs back. Steve Jobs started cleaning up Apple's product portfolio. Every single product got discontinued and replaced by 4 new computers. A desktop and a laptop for consumers, and a desktop and laptop for professionals. The computers were very well designed and looked very different. At the time, most computers were these boring grey boxes and Apple's new computers really stood out. Then Apple released the iPod that completely changed the way we listen to music, and the iPhone that redefined what a mobile phone means, and the iPad that defined what a tablet is. Chapter 4: The Tim Cook Era. Steve Jobs passed away in the fall of 2011 and left Tim Cook in charge as the new CEO. And since that, we have seen more iPhones, more Macs, more iPads in different sizes. They also released the Apple Watch, they bought Beats and released Apple Music, they released the HomePod, and now they're about to release their new TV subscription service, Apple TV Plus. However, recently they had the first decline in revenues and profits in a decade. So what can we learn from that? There is a pattern here. The most successful products and the products that defined Apple have all been released during the two Steve Jobs eras. In the 90s, Apple was struggling to compete with Microsoft, Compaq and IBM, and recently the competition from companies like Samsung and Huawei have left Apple struggling. So what made Steve Jobs' approach different from John Sculley's or Tim Cook's? To understand this, we have to look at how Apple approached innovation under Steve Jobs compared to now. And we have to understand the difference between two different kinds of innovation: incremental innovation and radical innovation. Incremental innovation means that you improve something that already exists. It's like going from the iPhone XS to the iPhone 11. Radical innovation means designing something completely new. It's like going from nothing to the iPad. It can either be done by creating a completely new kind of technology or by changing the meaning of a product, like the iPhone changed the way we think of a phone. Both kinds of innovation are necessary. Without radical innovation, we would still be in the Stone Age, but without incremental innovation, we would still run around with 12-year-old iPhones. Any successful product needs incremental innovation to keep up to date. But when we think of truly innovative companies, we usually remember them for their radical innovations. And Apple has a long history of radical innovation. The Lisa and the Macintosh, the iPod, iTunes, the iPhone, the iPad, and Apple Watch. And that is what has made Apple such an amazing company. But radical innovation is generally received as risky. A lot of resources go into putting a product like the iPad to market. And since nothing like the iPad existed, how would Apple know that it would take off? On the other hand, if Netflix is having success streaming movies, Apple will too. Since Tim Cook took over, Apple has relied almost exclusively on incremental innovation, with the exception of Apple Watch. The rest of the new products have either been updates of the existing product lines or products like the HomePod, which was made to compete with products like Amazon's Echo. This is also the case with their subscription services, Apple Music and Apple TV Plus. You could characterize Steve Jobs' era Apple as a design-driven company, and current Apple as a market-driven company. Jobs was really passionate about design. He worked closely with the designer Jony Ive, as well as the design agencies IDEO and Frog Design. Design was really at the core of Apple, but now it seems like the market dictates what products get made. A way to see if a company is design-driven is to look at management. How much influence does the designer with the highest rank have? Does he or she report directly to the CEO? And how involved is the CEO in the design process? Well, Steve Jobs was very involved in the design of the products, and until recently, Jony Ive has reported directly to Tim Cook. His position even changed from Senior Vice President to Chief Design Officer. But now Ive has left Apple to start his new company, Lovefrom, with Apple as a client. Apparently, Ive had been dissatisfied working at Apple. He skipped meetings and showed up late to the Apple office. There have been accounts that Tim Cook's disinterest in design was the main reason for Ive's dissatisfaction. Steve Jobs was very creative and embraced new and crazy ideas. That's not something you learn in business school. Tim Cook probably is a better person to run a business the size of Apple, but he lacks Steve Jobs' creativity and courage, and apparently he doesn't embrace these qualities either. A market-driven company asks the question, how can we compete with Samsung? But a design-driven company asks the question, how might we use this new multi-touch technology to improve our users' lives? Apple gives us what we want, and that is the problem. It's like Henry Ford said, if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. And as long as Apple continues this way, we will keep getting faster iPhones. The Tim Cook and the John Sculley eras look very similar. A lot of familiar products and nothing really new or exciting. Apple has to look out for their competition. If Apple isn't changing the future of technology, someone else will. And with companies like Microsoft releasing really exciting new products like the Surface Studio, which is an example of radical innovation and aims at Apple's original target audience, the creative professional, Apple's reputation as the company that creates radical new products is at stake. I think Jony Ive's new agency with Apple as a client is a really good move for him. And it will probably benefit Apple too. It allows Apple to design the updates of their existing product lines on their own and hire Jony Ive as a consultant to work on something new and exciting. It might also put Ive in a position where he can push Apple in a more courageous direction. Who knows what the future will bring? Is the Apple we love dead? Or will they come back with something completely new and revolutionary? What do you think? Please share your thoughts in the comment section below. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much for watching. I will be back soon with another video. Take care.